How do you choose a property advisor? There are so many buyer's agents out there. How do you know which one to trust? How do you avoid getting scammed? These are some of the questions we answer in today's Q&A podcast with Brett Warren, National Director of Metropole. So whether you're just starting out and looking for guidance, or if you've been investing for a while and want to take your skills to the next level, this podcast is for you. So welcome to today's show, and let's talk about getting advice when it comes to investing in property.
Welcome to the Michael Yardney podcast, where twice each week you will learn a number of new ideas regarding success, property investment and money in around 30 minutes. Our show is brought to you by Metropole, who specialise in helping you grow, protect and pass on your wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. Now here's your host, Michael Yardney, Australia's authority in wealth creation through property, who has been voted one of Australia's top 50 most influential thought leaders.
I love these question and answer podcasts when we answer your questions about property investing. And joining me to answer to your questions today is my business partner, Brett Warren, National Director at Metropole. Now, Brett, who was arguably Brisbane's best buyer's agent, is now using his 2 decades of property investment experience to advise clients how to build their property portfolios. Now, Brett studied economics, but he's not a theorist. He's a successful property investor. And after many years with Metropole, he's still passionate about helping our clients get the best results, as passionate as he ever was. Hi, Brett.
Hi, Michael. Thanks for the introduction. How's things with you?
Good, thank you. Now, I don't normally give you such a big wrap-up because we speak 2 or 3 times a day anyway, but we've had thousands of new listeners over the summertime, lots of new listeners to this podcast. So some people may be wondering, well, who is this guy and why should I listen to him? And I actually think that's a really important question, because one of the questions we're going to answer in just a moment is, how do you choose a property advisor? So I guess the next question is, how do you choose people who give advice on how to choose a property advisor?
It's such an important thing, isn't it, Michael? Because I think everyone's a property expert at the moment, given the last 12 or 18 months. So I think on the surface, everyone looks great, but I think it's below the surface, and perhaps we can dig a bit deeper into that today.
Right. Well, let's start with the first question. Janine left the following question on our website. Hey, thanks for the great podcast, Michael. I've learned a lot from you and want to take the next step, but I'm confused as I've spoken with a few advisors and they give me very different messages, while others wouldn't even give me any advice till I paid them. So my question is, how do I find an advisor I can trust? Well, Brett, that's a good question. What would you say?
Yeah, it is a good question. I think the first thing to understand is, well done on getting advice and seeking out advice. I think that's really, really important. Most people probably want to get advice and sometimes probably will go ahead and do things themselves. And look, I was sitting with someone just yesterday, Michael, and I asked them, they had a property that hadn't performed. And even in the last 8 years, I think it was, hadn't really grown in value and actually gone backwards. And I spoke to them about, if they'd paid for advice and where they got the advice from. And they said it was free advice. And obviously there'd been commissions and kickbacks and all those types of things. So that kind of led them down the wrong path and the wrong interest. And at the end of the day, there's a lot of information out there and there's so much free advice on the internet. Most people can probably think they can do it themselves. But, statistics and history would suggest that they probably get it wrong, because 50% of those who actually get into property sell up in their first 5 years. And those who stay the course, 90% never get past their first or second property.
That's a good point, Brett. So free advice that leads you down the wrong path doesn't really work. The most expensive advice, actually, I guess, is free advice that isn't right. So the problem is then, I guess Janine's question is, how do you judge the quality of advice you receive from a professional? So who could you ask? Let's quickly go through that for you, Janine. You could ask the real estate agent that you're buying a property from or considering, but they represent the vendor. Of course, there's all those project marketers that represent the developer. Now, many of them are guised marketers, pretend to be property mentors or buyer's agents. Brett, a couple of days ago, somebody in the industry was telling me about a mortgage broker who's now a buyer's agent and done really well last year because he put 100 clients into the same apartment building on the Gold Coast. Now, I'm not sure if that was a good or bad investment. I don't know, but I really can't understand how every one of his clients, the same building suited them.
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, if we put 100 people into a property, Michael, they've all got different needs, different budgets, different risk profiles. So that does seem quite unusual.
Yeah. Okay. Then there's also your mortgage broker, your accountant, financial planners. Now, most of those have an affiliation with project developers, and they make their recommendations based on their hefty commissions. Because of the large number of people that listen to this podcast, because of the large number of people who subscribe to our property update every day, we continuously get approached by developers, project marketers to pass them on leads, and they're prepared to give, especially in today's market, 10+% commission, and that's built into the cost of the project for the purchasers, Brett.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because the person I spoke to said they didn't pay anything at all. But in fact, they probably did pay that 10% commission. They just weren't aware of it. So you're 100% right.
Okay, so what about buyer's agents? Now, Brett, you started off as a client of ours, then well over a decade ago became a buyer's agent working for us. And we have a new manager, our team of buyer's agents around Australia. So they're an important part of the equation. But if you go to the average buyer's agent, they only make money if you use their services to buy a property, and they're usually only going to recommend a property in their own patch, not in other suburbs, not in other states. What if their patch doesn't suit you? So what's the correct advice? Should you buy? Should you sell? In the last couple of years, there's been a whole swag of new buyer's agents who've come onto the market. Now, these are well-meaning and enthusiastic people, but Brett, you and I know that you can actually do a short course. You can get a license with no experience. There's no minimum qualification other than a real estate license, which you can get pretty quickly to be a buyer's agent.
Yeah, isn't it? Yeah, look, you could be a builder for 30 years or an accountant or a painter, and all of a sudden you do a course, and now all of a sudden you're a buyer's agent dealing with sometimes millions of dollars, which is quite concerning, particularly if you're investing in people's future, and particularly if you're not that well educated.
So what we're saying is, or answering the question is, who do you ask for advice? Is a buyer's agent an important part of your team? Definitely, but they should implement the advice that, in my mind, is part of your long-term strategy. So I believe if you're asking me, I guess you are, Janine, you left the question, who should you ask for advice? You should ask a property strategist. Now, interestingly, Metropole were the first company in Australia to offer strategic property advice. We started helping clients back in 2000. Now, today, a lot of people call themselves strategists, but they don't necessarily give holistic advice. So they give so-called advice to justify clients using their buyer's agency. So again, there are some very good companies out there. Metropole's by no means not the only one, but find one that actually is going to suit your needs, because there's some out there who think, gee, if you own more than 3 or 4 properties, you're a greedy, ugly landlord. While most of our clients, or I shouldn't say most, a large percentage of our clients own very substantial property portfolios, Brett.
Yeah, and we've managed to spread that risk, and it kind of gets back to what you said before about, if I've got 3 or 4 properties in Brisbane, or 2 or 3, and I'm going to see someone in Brisbane who's based in Brisbane and buys in Brisbane, they're probably not going to have an interest in referring me to another area or location when it may be in my best interest for diversification and land tax reasons and things like that as well. So incredibly important to kind of look out for that as well.
So we believe buyer's agents are an important part of the equation. All our buyer's agents are actually experienced real estate agents who level the playing field, Brett, but they do more than that. They actually stack the odds in the favour of our clients. Now, there are a lot of other very good buyer's agents, and I know we're personal friends with many of them and good professional colleagues, and I've been very excited to see how more and more Australians are using buyer's agents. But maybe another addition to the question Janine asked is, who do you ask for advice as an advisor? Then how do you choose a buyer's agent? And Brett, recently there was a very well-known buyer's agent who started an academy for buyer's agents. His business plan is to sell courses to people who want to become buyer's agents. Now, there's nothing wrong with that in itself, but there are some real concerns that experienced buyer's agents have about this, isn't there?
Well, there is. And, obviously, most of the people that have the concerns are the ones that have been doing it for decades and realise the first couple of years you're probably making errors and mistakes and things like that as well. And you haven't got the experience of yourself, Michael, or people who have had decades of experience backing you. And like I said before, if you've been an accountant or a mortgage broker for 20 years and all of a sudden you're a buyer's agent, with no understanding of markets and areas and locations and not having that broader knowledge, there's a high chance that you could become that person's first couple of mistakes, and you obviously don't want to be in that position.
Well, this particular course is churning out a group of enthusiastic amateurs. They're keen people, they love property, they're nice people, but they're being misled because it's alluring them with a promise of big incomes, helping other people buy properties for other people, and they don't really need experience is what the course is telling you. Just enthusiasm. It says you can do it part-time. You can get other people to do the research for you. You can have an offshore VA. You can get the inspections done by local property managers. It teaches them how to market themselves as professionals. It's not a scam, but these are enthusiastic amateurs. And I like what you said. Basically, what they're doing is they're learning from you for the first couple of years.
Yeah. I subscribe to Malcolm Gladwell's book about outliers, and I think I wrote an article about this in terms of the 10,000 hour rule, Michael. And a buyer's agent from just starting up, or maybe someone who thinks they like investing in property, to get 10,000 hours could potentially be 5 or 10 years full-time work in the property industry and the property space and investing, and the average person just doesn't have that. So I think that's a really good starting point, experience and understanding, working with people who have been there for such a long time.
Now, interestingly, we have a team of buyer's agents in 3 states in Australia. And as I explained, they're all experienced estate agents. But I know we are continuously approached by people. In fact, I only sent you a CV a couple of days ago from somebody who was in a totally different industry but loved property. So he did a course, now he's a buyer's agent. And, well, we're not prepared to employ those. So maybe I should ask you, having managed that team for years now, what are the reasons why you should employ a buyer's agent?
Yeah, look, if you go back to the first thing you said, Michael, about a lot of free data and a lot of free information being available, 20 years ago, you couldn't get all that information, but now it's so readily available and there's so much information out there. I think what a buyer's agent should be able to do, and most people understand and can read data and analyse data, but I think what the buyer's agent's strength is actually giving the people the right data to analyse. So, helping them understand, our research goes into, investor or a homeowner, but, it takes into consideration macro factors, long-term fundamentals, not just what's happening in the next couple of months or what happened in the last couple of years. So we start with the macro factor, we break it down into the right state, right suburb, and then probably just like where our listeners live, just in your suburb, there's good parts of the suburb, there's okay parts of the suburb. And then finally, it's the property. So 80% of it is the location, and the last 20% of it's the property. So the research is the big part. Getting that side of things is really, really important. The second part of the process is negotiation. And I guess, most people are lucky enough to probably buy a home once every 7 years and maybe an investment property once every couple of years as well. We do that every week. So, the vendor's got an expert on their side that's been, I don't like to use the expression, but trained to kill and trained to go in for blood, Michael. Yeah. They can see people coming a mile away. So the buyer's agents can, the experienced buyer's agents can kind of see through that and cut through that and put your offer forward on the top of the pile or understand conditions. And I guess the new breed of buyer's agents don't really understand that. And the other thing is, as I said before, those experienced agents understand the language that selling agents use. And quite often we probably get told a little bit more than we should, Michael, and that's not uncommon either. And then I guess the last piece of the puzzle is the networks and the contacts, and one having a team around them of conveyancers and building and pest and market and things like that as well. And then finally, networks is important because the contacts you make, we probably get about 40, some cases more, 40% of properties off market. That's because we know the agents, the areas, we've been buying in those areas for so long. We've got constant contact with the agents. So like you said before, it's not evening out the odds at all. It's actually stacking them in your favour. And we saw that a lot last year, particularly with investors and home buyers who were struggling to get into the market.
Now, Janine, you asked a really good question, and Brett and I have got a little bit off topic because you asked who you should ask for advice. But since a lot of people do ask buyer's agents for advice, I guess we are still on topic, Brett. So you explained why we should use a buyer's agent. So if people are thinking about using a buyer's agent, maybe helping Janine and other listeners, if you're going to consider using one, how do you choose one? What sort of questions would you ask?
Well, the first thing is don't be afraid to ask a question. Don't be afraid to ask that exact question. What's your background? What's your experience? You want to know if they've been in the industry for 20 years or they've been in the industry for 5 minutes and done a quick course and, can talk a good game and are a slick salesperson. We obviously get there's a lot of fly-by-nighters that are in and out of the industry and agents who fly in and fly out just chasing a quick dollar as well. So I'd want to know their experience, how long they've worked in the industry. I guess one of the most important questions I'd like to know as well, Michael, is particularly if you're an investor, is are you a property investor yourself? Because hand on heart, and I think the way we sleep at night is we could never buy something or put something into someone's portfolio that we wouldn't put in our own portfolio. And I don't think there's too many people that can say that. So, the other thing is obviously, when you're working with sales agents, they've always got these kind of little undercover, little buyers agents running around as their sidekick, and they pretend to be on your side and they're going to help you out and find a property. And at the end of the day, they're also being paid by the vendor. So you've just got to be careful, and asking those really important questions, I think, will make a difference.
Sure. So some people would say, well, what qualifications have they got? And actually, you don't need a qualification other than a license, and you don't even need a license. You can work under somebody else's, and you can get a license in 4 days if you're smart. So we actually haven't said this for years, Brett, but it actually takes longer to learn to be a manicurist or look after people's nails than it does to be an estate agent or a buyer's agent.
Yeah, that's very true. Hairdresser
too, perhaps. Takes longer.
It's pretty sad, isn't it, really? I mean, there's low barriers to entry, and that's why it makes it so difficult. Like you said, you can get your REIQ or REIV, REINSW, and sometimes there's REBA and things like that as well, but they're just bits of paper at the end of the day. They don't really mean anything. So that's why you've got to dig below the surface and ask the right questions.
Now, we have for years thought it's important to regulate the property industry, and that's why we were foundation members of PIPA, the Property Investment Professionals of Australia, which its aim initially was, but it's been going for close to 20 years now and really hasn't gotten any closer. The government's not interested in regulating property investment advice. We've had governments of all persuasions, and each state's got different real estate legislation, but there's property advice is not regulated. So it's still good for your buyer's agent to be a member of the REIQ, REIV, REINSW, or the local real estate institute. Are they members of REBA? Real Estate Buyers Association is a national buyers association. It's a little bit of a union of little one-man bands. So we've chosen at Metropole not to be a member of that. Not all industry associations have a very high entry point. You fill out some forms, you pay your fees, and you're in the club, and it actually makes you look a little bit better than you are. So I'd just be a little bit careful about asking which associations, because I'm not sure that they mean as much. But I think your question a moment ago that you started off with was, how long have you been in the industry? That's a really important one.
Yeah, how long you've been in the industry now? You're a property investor yourself, because that's critically important. Obviously, someone's got to start somewhere, but I guess having that deep sense of knowledge about the market, about different types of cycles, things that you've failed and tried again, you've got to be continually refining. And as we can see at the moment, Michael, the market's always changing. The industry's always changing. So they are cycles, they do repeat. And if you've just been through not even half a cycle and it's been a really, really good time, you're probably going to get found out when the market changes if you don't change accordingly and recognise that opportunity.
Sure. So do they have the skills? Do they have the expertise to deliver what they promise? Now, again, I think all this young breed of new buyers agents, they're good people. They're nice people. They've got some investments. They are enthusiastic. So they're not there to scam you. Sure, it is hard when you start off. I guess you've got to do something to get a commission and make a sale and live and pay your expenses. But do they have the expertise to deliver on what they genuinely want to, the promise? Ask if you can talk to some of their past clients or their present clients. Have a look at Google reviews. There's so many review websites, but I think Google, Brett, is probably the one that I'd be paying some attention to, because you can't scam the Google reviews, can you?
No, they're independent, absolutely, and they state that and say that as well. So that, we always encourage people to give that feedback, good or bad, because it gives a good representation of their experience.
Well, at Metropole, we've been involved in over $5 million worth of property transactions, so it's fair to say we know a thing or two about buying investment properties and definitely about buying people's homes. And we've got hundreds of reviews. And interestingly, there are some negative ones. Interestingly, though, on Google, when you find the reviews, the negative ones, they tend to be from tenants where we've actually gone to bat for our clients, our landlords, and been firm on some tenants. Correctly so, they haven't liked it. But in fact, we've done long-term reviews of our clients, and it's interesting. They're always very happy when we've bought a property for them. Of course they are. That's exciting. What's really more important is, are they still happy, and how have their properties performed 2 years, 5 years, 10 years later? And I know that you still even though you're a national director of the company, you see clients and do annual reviews. So it's exciting to see how people's properties have performed. And an audit of the results of our clients at Metropole a short while ago showed that they're 7.3 times more likely to own 6 or more properties than the average property investor. So that's, I guess, part of the reason why a lot of our clients are so happy, because they're in that top 1% of property investors, Brett.
Yeah, well, I think we put an article together last year just showing people the properties we bought last year, one from each kind of state. And what was standing out for me was the fact that whatever the market did, we actually outperformed that market by a fair way. So, the results speak for themselves, and that's what we've been able to achieve over a long period of time and help our clients expand their portfolio significantly faster and safer.
Safer is important. And that's actually an interesting point when people say, can you guarantee what capital growth is going to be? No. Who would have a year ago thought that in 2022 there'd be 8 interest rate rises? Who would have thought there'd be a war overseas that's still there today now? So you can't guarantee the future, but we can guarantee that we can outperform the markets based on past performance. But in fact, Brett, there are probably some things we can predict about the future. When we say we can't guarantee the future, statistics show that if you start now and you go out forward, 5, 10, 15 years, of those people who get in property investment, half of them are going to get out of the game within 5 years. So I can guarantee that even though 2023 is going to be a good year, 2023 is going to be the year that the property market resets. It's going to be the year when eventually inflation is going to be under control. Interest rates are going to peak. There'll be 1 or 2 more rises, and then the market will move on. A new cycle will start. I can guarantee that of those people who get into property investment, because the past's been good history, half of them will have bought dud properties, done the wrong thing, not got the right finance, and they'll be out. I guess I can also guarantee that in 10, 15 years' time, those who get into the market now, 92% of them will only ever own 1 or 2 investment properties. So they're not going to secure their future. And I guess we can also guarantee that 1% of investors are going to own 6 or more properties, because that's the way it's been for a long time. So how do you jump the line? How do you get to that point where you are in that top 1%? Well, you and I know that we have put a formula, some frameworks together that I've fine-tuned over 50 years and 5 decades of investing, and we have been showing and helping our clients with for over 20 years. So while we can't guarantee anyone's results, because unfortunately smart people do dumb things with their money and don't always make the best decisions, we can guarantee that we've got frameworks that have helped a lot more investors, probably more investors, successful investors than anyone else in Australia. So if you're interested in understanding how you can fall into that top 1% of investors, I'll leave a link in the show notes. Go to metropole.com.au. And Brett, even though I know you're really busy at the moment, are you happy to see more new clients?
Always, yeah. Look, it's a good start to the year. There's some excitement in the air. We know the market's probably going to reset at some stage this year. I think everyone agrees on that. They just, I guess disagree a little bit on timing. But I think it's a great time, even if you're not looking to buy, to actually plan, prepare, maybe take a step sideways before you do push ahead, and the time's right.
Actually, I think it's a really good point you just made, that everyone agrees that inflation is going to stop this year. The timing isn't certain. Everyone agrees it's going to be the top of interest rate this year. But whether it's 2, 1, no more interest rate rises, 3 or 4, it's going to happen. And then the world will continue on as it always does. So we actually got sidetracked, as you and I tend to do when we talk. But we were asking, what does one ask a buyer's agent? And the first question really was, how long have you been in the industry? So what else would you ask them?
Well, I'd want to know to make sure they specialised in the area that you're looking to buy or you've been advised to buy. We've seen a lot of people kind of fly in and fly out, which I think is just unbelievable, not knowing the market experience at the ground level. I know a lot of our buyer's agents, Michael, they may have worked for us for 5 or 7 years, but they've probably been in the industry for 10 or 15 years to some extent, and they know the area like the back of their hand. And I know a very, very, very successful investor, Michael, who's been investing for 50 years and probably knows more about property than anyone. That might ring a bell. And when you purchased here, Michael, I know how much you know about property. Did you just come and buy a property, or did you look for a specialist?
I looked for a specialist. I looked for obviously one of our team members at Metropole, but also somebody who specialised in the sort of property that the team in Metropole bought me in Brisbane, which was a development site. And to be blunt, the last properties we've bought in the last years in Melbourne, while I've been a little bit more involved, it really wasn't me, because I'm not in the market every day anymore. And I think that's really, really important.
Yeah, both of those buyers agents, Michael, have been in that industry and been buying for over 10 years. That's incredible, and that's probably why they got them off market, and they got the right little niche in the right pocket in the right area. So I think it's pretty evident, and I just find it astounding that some people buy sight unseen and have buyers agents that fly in and fly out. It's quite remarkable.
Right. I guess I'd also be asking them about their networks, how established they are. A good buyer's agent will not only have intimate knowledge of the real estate market, but they'll have deep connections to selling agents, as you have said, because a large portion of the properties we buy at Metropole are off market. They're going to open up opportunities for you that you wouldn't be able to get yourself. I know we get calls all day long to see if we've got qualified buyers for properties, because some are off market and some are what we call pre-market. And in today's market, I know that close to a quarter of the properties we're buying have been secured off market. We got sidetracked a bit, and because of that, we actually aren't going to have a chance to answer any other questions other than Janine's one today. But I actually think it was a good discussion. So who do you ask for advice? Be careful, because there are 25 million property experts in Australia. Everyone has got an opinion about property, but that doesn't mean that you've got to listen to their advice. Any other thoughts to finish up, Brett?
No, like we talked about, just making sure that people have had experience. Don't be afraid to ask. I know sometimes it can be intimidating, but a person who is successful and has the runs on the board won't be shy in giving you the confirmation you need about their experience. So that's probably my advice.
Well, Brett, there were two other questions I was hoping to get to today, which we didn't, but we'll have to get back again real soon and have another chat. Thanks for your time, Brett.
Thanks for your time.
Now here's Michael's mindset message. Remember, a change in your thinking will lead to a change in your life.
In my mindset message today, I'd like to talk to you about the big difference between the rich and the average Australian. So, do you want to know the big secret of why the rich are richer? Of course, many people have studied the topic, many have written about it. Napoleon Hill wrote a book called The 16 Laws of Success after studying wealthy people for 20 years in his classic book, the one we've all read, that he wrote in 1937, Think and Grow Rich. My good friend Tom Corley studied the rich and poor for 5 years, and he wrote his first book, Rich Habits. Then together we wrote Rich Habits, Poor Habits, which has become an international bestseller. Hey, there's a new edition of it out now too, so you can find that at richhabitspoorhabits.com and get the updated edition. But we wrote Rich Habits, Poor Habits, which has become an international bestseller and has been translated into 5 languages. Now, just to make things clear, when I talk about the rich and the poor, this is not a judge of people. They're all important and valuable, but it has to do with the level of wealth they've achieved. And in Australia, there aren't really poor people, or very few, but we're talking about the average Australian. But we've actually found that many things separate the rich from, let's please keep calling them the poor. But contrary to what the poor want to believe, it's not only luck, it's not fate. Tom Corley found that the poor prefer to believe the rich have some advantage that they don't have. This type of thinking enables the poor to remain in their situation without taking any responsibility for it. It's always somebody else's fault, the government or the system or my education or my parents. Now, sure, luck plays a part in life, but lucky people do many proactive things to put themselves in the position to take advantage of the luck when it strikes. So here's the big difference. The poor, and in fact the average Australian, focuses on survival and on instant gratification. They don't think beyond the moment. However, the very rich think and plan very far into the future, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years into the future. Just describing it a different way may help you understand what I'm getting at. The poor think about the moment. They think about paycheck to paycheck, or they don't get checks anymore, do they, but pay period to pay period at the end of the week. The middle class, they're hoping to make it through the month. But the rich, the wealthy, they're planning a year ahead. They're planning their several years ahead for the future. And multi-millionaires, they're thinking decades or so in the future. So if you want more money, if you want more freedom in life, you're going to have to learn to delay gratification. Now, it's interesting how this theme comes up so often in my mindset moments. But successful people have got the ability to work hard to accomplish something which isn't achieved for a long time. They possess higher patience and an aptitude to postpone the enjoyment of their work. That's because they understand that long-term success takes a lot of skill that unsuccessful people don't have or haven't experienced. They know that if you have the easy path now, it's going to be hard later in life, but if you do the hard things in life now, life's going to be easier in the future. So the attributes that the wealthy people have include proper planning for upcoming challenges. They also develop a level of self-confidence, resilience, tolerance. On the other hand, unsuccessful people, by and large, they can't see the forest for the trees. So learning to delay gratification rather than seeking immediate satisfaction, in my mind, is an essential part of success. And that's just as important when it comes to property investing. It takes time to allow the power of leverage and compounding to grow a large asset base of residential properties. Yet too many people are trying to find the next get-rich-quick scheme, the next hotspot, get on top of this quick property cycle that we're experiencing now to get rich quick. It takes time to allow the power of leverage and compounding to grow a substantial asset base. If it happens too easy, if it happens too quickly, it's not going to last. While it takes time to change the ingrained habits and approaches to life that we've all been taught since childhood, the good news is, though, it's entirely doable. So start with small alterations to your thought patterns by acknowledging the habits. That's why I'm making you aware of them. Acknowledge the habits that are now trying to give you instant, immediate gratification. As I said, remember, if it comes too quickly, chances are you're going to lose it again just as readily. All good things take time. And as Warren Buffett wisely said, wealth is the transfer of money from the impatient to the patient. Well, thanks for spending the last little while with me, and I hope you got some benefit from this show. If you did, and you know somebody else who'd also benefit, please tell them about the Michael Yardney podcast. There's a share button on every podcast app. On Apple Podcasts, there's 3 little buttons down the bottom. Press it and share it, or just tell them about the Michael Yardney podcast. I hope you're going to be doing them a favour, and you'll definitely be doing me a favour and helping me in my quest to make as many people as possible financially literate. Now, there's ways of catching up with me between these shows. Just look for Michael Yardney on social media, or why not join my private Facebook group? Go to Facebook and look for the Property Update Facebook group. And I have a way of saying thank you to you for subscribing to this podcast. Go to podcastbonus.com.au. There'll be a link in the show notes, podcastbonus.com.au, where you can get a bunch of ebooks and reports. My way of saying thank you. And when you've got time, why not listen to some of the old podcasts? There's individual lessons in each of those that I think would be helpful for you. I'll be back again real soon. In the meantime, have a great week. Make it a great week.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Michael Yardney podcast, which was brought to you by Metropole, who help their clients grow, protect, and pass on their wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. If you like what you heard and don't already subscribe, you'll find us on iTunes or on your favourite Android app as the Michael Yardney Podcast. Watch out for our next show, which comes to you twice a week, and you'll learn some new ideas about property investment, success and money in around 30 minutes. To get more of Michael's thoughts, go across to www.propertyupdate.com.au and sign up for his daily morning briefing, and you'll hear from not only Michael but a group of leading property success and money experts. And just a reminder that the information you heard in this show today is general educational advice and not specific investment advice, as we don't know your personal circumstances. If you're looking for specific advice, why not ask the team at Metropole to help you?